Hey, want to welcome you to the channel. And this is a recording from back in April 2024. I did with Stefan Denz. And we go into the details of what it's like to work with a large consultancy, what it's like to have your own solo practice, how to position yourself, how to sell, how to think about consulting in general, and how to work with clients and get higher value contracts. So enjoy the recording and like and subscribe and drop any questions that you might have in the comments. Enjoy. Welcome to the show. I don't know if we call it that, but this is Stefan Denz, and I think we're just gonna have a chat about consulting today. Like, you have quite a few years in the consulting field, and I think, just after chatting with you last week, I think there's a lot that you can bring to the table just to educate people on, like, what is it to be a consultant? How do you see the consulting world? So I guess tell us a bit about your background. And what does your day-to-day look like?
Hey, yeah, it's awesome, Troy. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy being invited and talk about, well, the profession we both love. And so I'm Stefan Denz. I'm the managing director for the strategy consulting business in Fujitsu Services, Germany. I'm doing this in different types of, deep down consulting now for more than 15 years. I also have my own company, so I do a lot of SME consulting. So I consult with a lot of smaller businesses as well. And on the other hand, for my primary job, most of the clients are even within the Forbes 500. So there's quite a big, how would you say that? Difference in terms of what is the problem and how to solve it. Yeah. So,
cool.
That's about it.
Why do you think consulting is a good path for somebody to choose? Like, what has it given you, and why would you suggest other people choose a consulting route?
Well, primarily, I think it's just the experience. There is literally no other type of service-oriented business that can bring you to so many different angles of life, business, meeting different types of people, and having the same, let's call it, toolbox, solving lots of different things. And within the last 10 years since I rejoined Fujitsu, I would say I have visited about 500 different companies and have sold more than 1,000 projects. So that's literally about 100 projects a year we do, and some are very small and some are large. Some are really at the heart of the business from the client, and some are just, fixing one or two issues they face. It's just a variety. And also, I must say, it also, beyond that experience thing, there is nothing more fulfilling than helping other people solve their issues. And you can argue you can do this with product-led business. Sure. If you look at some of the most common known social media heroes like Justin Welch, he does a lot with product-led consulting, but it's different if you really work synchronous with your client and help him to get over a big hump.
I love that. When we first connected, you were pretty stoked that I was in, like, the whole consultants realm. I guess I want to ask you, like, why did you agree to do this interview? Like, what was exciting for you? I think that it was really interesting to me because you're pretty stoked about, like, this whole consulting space. So I'm genuinely curious from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it comes down to your energy and enthusiasm about helping consultants to have a better, let's call it, go to market and find their first success and these things. Because if you are transitioning from a corporate consulting job, or if you're starting freshly as a consultant, the biggest hurdle is to not get washed up in all that stuff you can read on LinkedIn, what consulting should be, and waste a lot of time before you land your first client. And there's a lot of confusion about what consulting really is. And it's really rare to find somebody who is really that enthusiastic about helping consultants to do their first win and scale beyond that. Usually they target against, this big corporate type of consultants, like the McKinseys and stuff like this. Because there's easier money to make because there's so many people and, companies spend easily. So yeah, and I loved your approach. And I think with 2 or 3 of your posts on LinkedIn, you really hit the nail on the head. Like the one where you talked about experience, why now it's a good time to be a solopreneur, a consultant. So it was just me feeling that you're passionate about this and you can add a lot to the table.
I love that. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. How do you think about, like, I think this is a good transition, but how do you think about sales as a consultant? Like, where do you find people fall short, and how can they become better at sales as a consultant? So I think you've done some, like, based on what you told me, you've done some pretty significant and impressive projects. So I'm genuinely curious to your perspective.
I think it comes down to the basic principles of selling in the first place. Is like, don't try to sell by using tons of words. I think that's the first thing. Stop trying to confuse people about what you're able to do. And especially for consultants who are not transactional salespeople, it's much more about asking questions. So when I teach my junior consultants who join my unit, I tell them, look, the moment you start asking more questions, automatically the rate increases, because your counterpart starts to realize it's not about you as a pitching consultant, but rather about understanding where they're coming from and doing a diagnosis. And the picture I use is usually of a good MD. If you go to your doctor, you usually don't have him like, oh, I have 50,000 tablets. Do you want to try this one? It will solve all your issues. He rather starts to ask you, hey, what's your problem? What's your feeling? Where's your pain? And he starts to diagnose by asking. And then at the right moment, you start to point your finger at the pain. And that's also something that a lot of salespeople, traditional salespeople, are not very comfortable, and which a consultant absolutely needs to do is like, you have to give back, or how would you say, you need to visualize what you heard, the pain, back to your client. And then he starts to realize, all right, you got it. So it's much less about talking. It's much more about being really intrigued about what the issue is and then starting to connect the dots. Because most of the time, clients, if they would know the answer, they wouldn't meet with you. They need somebody to put all the puzzle pieces together. And the more you ask questions and try to nail down the thing, it's easier. And then, especially, and that's what I also tell people a lot, is don't just send over offers. Never send an offer you have not discussed with a client before, because he might be surprised what is in there. Usually I only send, from my unit, we only send offers once we have discussed all the parameters. So ask, is there a budget? Are you really serious about this? What do you really need from me? And that's it. Just have an honest adult conversation. And maybe the last factor is about much more about getting out of this. Here's the client, so he's the king. Here's a partner. He needs me as much as I need him. And that just changes your perspective a lot.
Yeah, it removes a lot of like the neediness from wanting the deal, instead of like, we're partners here, I'm here to actually serve you. I think what you said with just asking the right questions, like, instead of just talking about all the stuff that you have to offer, it's like, when you ask the right questions, they feel, understood. They feel like you actually care about like what's going on, and they can express themselves. That's amazing. I love that. How many people have you, I think you mentioned before, you have a ton of junior consultants that you're working with. How many people are you working with on a day-to-day basis, like underneath you?
So directly underneath me is 35, but in total, because there's also, a practice which is heavily focused on SAP topics, and well, that's coming from an IT company, it's pretty obvious that you do SAP stuff. There are other consultants in the ServiceNow area. So in total, it's about 600 consultants.
And they're all consultants.
Yes, and about, you would say about 500 are really focused on just implementing projects. It's like you deliver stuff. On the strategy side, it's much less than that. which is pretty obvious because you need much less strategy consultants that solve issues than you need people that run large projects. And I keep telling to people, if you just look at the size of McKinsey, these are about 30,000 people. 5,000 are support functions, and they still are one of the largest consultancy companies out there. So that's also why I keep telling people, as a solo consultant, you can make a huge splash on the market if you just are willing to go all in. And as I said, at the moment, there is more and more companies that just need support. And
100%. And just even fractional support, not even having a full-time person, just somebody coming in, giving the insight, leaving, and then it reduces a ton of risk on their end too in regards to benefits and different things like that. Okay. What would you say, since like you have such a large team of consultants, it's really impressive, by the way, but that you have 35 direct reports, and I think there's like 600 other consultants, you said. That's fantastic. What would you say some of the biggest challenges are in the day-to-day of managing other consultants?
First of all, it's, I think, finding the people with the right attitude, because as consulting is this looming, grooming, whatever kind shiny star, everybody wants to be a consultant. There's not as much people that enjoy it day to day, because it is a tough job. And I'm not saying you have to work your ass off. I'm just saying you have to go all in. And sometimes that means like you really need to go the extra mile if necessary. And on the other hand, it also needs a lot of discipline to, if there's not a lot of pressure from clients, also wind down. Because otherwise you go burn out like hell. And that's, you know, if you look at the big four or MBB companies, they pump out so many associates after 2 or 3 years, which are close to burnout, because these people can't, you know, turn down themselves. And then it's about get rid of this thing that you need to be a professional in one kind of specialization. You really just need to understand it's all about methodology, and you need to be really good at that methodology. And that means you need to sweat the small stuff. It doesn't mean you need to be a perfectionist, but it means like just stating the problem back to a client needs to be really rigorous. You don't care about all the other details, but if you get the problem wrong, you will always get the solution wrong.
Oh, I love that. If you always get the problem wrong, you'll always get the solution wrong. That's a good one. Why would you say someone should not become a consultant? Like, how would you, what are, say someone's interested in the space, what are some things that like, maybe it's like a misconception of them wanting to become a consultant?
I would say, going back to what I just said, if you are a perfectionist, and I'm not saying sweating the small details, but like you always want to get the extra mile and don't, because it will never be perfect, because the person that defines perfect is the client. And that might mean that you need to deliver something which, well, might not be perfect for you. And secondly, if you're a really transactional person in terms of doing a routine job, I wouldn't also do it, because you will miss a lot of opportunities if you just want to do one tiny thing. And then if you're a salesperson, if you're just a pure salesperson, so this, I don't know if in the Americas you also have Vorwerk, which we use here in Germany. It's a very traditional company that has grown with vacuum cleaners. And it's a really high class brand. And they have these salespeople that go from door to door to door, and they're really good at pitching to people, but that will not get it done for you as consulting. And then, and it's reality. Some people want to do back office jobs. That's not a consultant. You want to work with clients and other people. That's it.
I think the perfection point was very interesting from the standpoint of like, how do I say this? When I was working on a lot of design projects, you'll never have the design perfect. And no matter what you believe is perfect and what the client believes is perfect is two different realities. So like not aiming for always perfection on something is like even 90% complete is actually better than doing it 100% because you can't go back and course correct 100%, if that makes sense. Like if you've made something perfect to the finest degree, you can't change anything. So that's interesting. I think that's a really huge one. And it's, yeah, I think people do, like, we all have our own, I think consultants in general have a lot of self-confidence issues. So they want to make something perfect to make sure that this is great. And so this is great. And then I can feel better. And it's like, no, like some things can be, I don't want to say half baked, but they can be delivered in a way that's not totally perfect. And like you can course correct based upon delivery. I love that.
And I think going back to also the juniors and stuff like this, I think my experience just shows the two principles you really need to get into your head is Pareto, which means like 80% of your output is done with 20% of the input, which means like 20% of your clients will deliver 80% of your profit and stuff like this. But it also means if you have spent more than 20% of the project volume without seeing the client and getting feedback, you might miss the mark already quite a lot. So that's the one principle. And the other one is Parkinson. It's like if you give stuff too much time or too many people, which means like, again, more time, it will overcomplicate itself. Work is growing as much as you give it bandwidth. So you need to have really self-discipline to say, I work on this for 4 hours and then I get feedback. I will not spend another half an hour. I will not do anything else. That will put pressure on you to focus on, the real stuff, not on fancy, tiny little details that nobody cares about.
I love that. That's cool, man. I dig that a lot. How did you end up getting into this space? I'm genuinely curious. Like, how did you fall into consulting?
So, multiple parameters led me to this path. So the first one was when I was very young, like about 14, I was really down into software development. And also I did a lot of consulting like work, so corporate design and stuff like this. So there were quite some of the clients I still have today. They needed somebody to put up a homepage, then look at other stuff and things like this. And because I was also in esports, I started to learn programming because I wanted to build a content management system for us. And I started to realize that, I can go down that route of perfectionism, or I can do what I think I can do. I can start to translate more customer demand problems into assets somebody else delivers. So I started to build more like an agency company. And when I then joined Fujitsu again in 2012, they hired me to run the SAP business for the Western Hemisphere, which was quite successful. But I quickly realized that the success of building a business primarily came from me talking with our clients, not naming any detail of the projects, but rather spending time on them. So where's your risks? Oh, we see your risk. We will manage that. How do we go about this? So painting up a picture which told them, don't worry about the details. We will get you there. So we will make sure the SAP project will run flawlessly. And from there, it started to flow. So Fujitsu realized that I'm pretty good with this. So they gave me a team which was primarily doing consulting around business problems. And I started to build this. And that's it. I really grew into it because I think I have a good, unique skill of being very quick of visualizing what you just told me back at the whiteboard and also coming up with scalable models. So how to sustain stuff. And I also understand business processes, which is also very rare. I somehow learned in the last 5 years. And every company needs business processes.
Cool. That's cool. What makes, how do I say this? What do you think the benefit of being an independent consultant is versus, say, the big four consulting firms? Because even though like you do say you do have like 600 people consulting at your firm, if you compare it to like McKinsey or whatever, I would say it's a smaller consultancy, which kind of makes you more nimble and on your toes and like, so I'm curious your standpoint, like what makes an independent consultant different than a big four consulting firm?
That's an excellent question. And if you just look at my core group, which is 35 strategy consultant, that's already small. So whenever I enter a client which is not mid-sized, they ask me like, you do strategy consulting? I thought you were into air conditioning or SAP or whatever. so it's this, it feels like the same, Goliath versus David thing. My opinion is about this. It's really about personality. The challenge that large corporate consultants have is you have this bench of people and they might be excellent and they might have excellent teams. The problem is you need to give them work, which means like you will pressure them a lot to deliver project by project by project. And it's not unhumane, it's just optimizing your profits. And especially mid-sized companies, they realize this leaves them with a big issue. These consultants will deliver a concept and then leave you. The project is done. So you either find another transaction with them, which they usually don't want to do because implementation is not their job, or you need to find somebody else. And then your problems begin. Lots of risk, handover risks, translation risks. Does the concept really fit my needs? And you as a smaller or mid-sized company, everything you do needs to be about de-risking what you're doing. And solopreneurs or small team consultants usually can be tied much more to your business, which means like you feel like a connection to them. And that puts you in a unique space. You can't fight with Big Four on audits and stuff like this, but you don't. You want to niche down and really solve executive personal problems. And executives usually don't trust people easily because it's very lonely at the top. And often you are let down by very expensive consultants. So once you have started to deliver to them, you are much more attractive to keep around. And you don't need to fight. You don't need to feed a pyramid scheme, which is also typical for large companies.
I think you mentioned this once before, the CEOs like being lonely at the top. I think it was CEOs work from 6 till 8 and your average employee works from 9 till 5. And the best time to get a hold of a CEO is after the 5 p.m. mark. That was interesting. I thought that was a fascinating insight from you. So I just want to reshare that. So, okay. When we spoke last time too, you mentioned consulting's about saving people time. I guess, why is saving a client time important in your eyes?
Because that's the only real variable or input you cannot get back. So people worry a lot of times about money. If you are a corporation, getting more money is usually not the biggest concern because you always find a way to have more money. If you look at, for example, let's just look at Uber. When did they get profitable? Oh, never. But they still have money like hell. So the problem for their managers is time, because you can't rewind time. So that's why you ask a coach. And if we both just think about a good day-to-day example, it's like people always try to use shortcuts like diet pills, injections, these kind of things, instead of just going to the gym 4 times a week, because going to the gym 4 times a week takes a lot of time. And that's also why you hire professionals as an executive. You want them to be quicker as if you would do it yourself. And that's it. It is about making sure you focus on getting the results for the client before they expect it. Then you have a winning formula already.
I love that. And doing it yourself, like I want to reiterate that point. Doing it yourself generally costs you a lot of time. So when you're working with somebody that's gotten the result, it can get you there quicker. That's cool. I dig that. So if you were to do your consulting career all over again, what would you do differently?
Well, from a perspective of being in a larger corporation, I must say I worried about too long about the corporate rules that exist in large corporations, because most product-led businesses are set up in a way that is not very supportive for consulting-like work, but it needs consultative-like work because selling a product is really tough. It needs to solve an issue. And I think also a lot of what I shared before, what I'm trying to teach my young consultants, and that's a typical human problem. We always want to be perfectionists. We always want to make everything the right way. We spend too much time worrying. We don't go out enough. It is about, I think, trying to shortcut myself much more into do quicker than thinking about it. And I think that's it. I don't know. I must say I'm quite happy with how life shaped up until this point. And
yeah. No, it's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So you kind of touched on this a little bit actually in that question. What are some things that you believe a newer consultant should do to prepare themselves for, say, getting their first client or getting their first handfuls of clients? What are some things that they can do to kind of start breaking into that space?
So, and we touched upon this already, and it is about niching down first. You need to be aware what the challenges of your client are. And what I try to tell people is, it is so easy these days to understand somebody before you met them first. It's not like that complicated. You open their website, you look at what they post at LinkedIn, you do some Googling, you do some market research, what is happening, and don't spend like 5 days on this. This can be done in hours. And then try to understand, who is this person I want to talk about? And then just don't have this mindset of getting into this first interaction with selling. It is just try to meet clients as many times as you can. Just meet people. It is so interesting to see when juniors raise at the moment, they always want to get this one client. And I tell them, listen, if you never met this person, don't try to get this one client. Try to get in front of as many clients as possible, because it will provide the competence you need to really convince them. And then the second step, and I think this is what you touch upon, also building your community and stuff like this, is packaging. How do you convince a client to buy from you because he thinks he gets much more value than he will pay for? Because nobody buys something that is of less value than he is paying for. Which means like 100%. Prepare a good proposal, and it doesn't need to be long, but restate the problem you understood, restate the goals you have agreed upon, and then only start to dig down. Okay, this is how we go about this, and this will cost you X. And that's already the first steps. And I listened to a really good podcast. I'm trying to come up with the name. It's longer ago. They discussed about role models. So, and the person they interviewed, he was like, it was his dad, because his dad was a door salesman, and he only realized after his dad passed away that his biggest skill was his nerves. Like, he was knocking on doors and getting no's a lot. So he got about 20, 30 no's each day. And his son, the son didn't ask him, so why are you still that happy you got 20 no's? And he said, like, there is no downside to getting a no, but having enough no's will mean you will get a yes eventually. There's a lot of upside of having yes. So just get into the mode of ask for it. Just ask for the sale. And keep going. You're not going bankrupt because you asked 20 people. You usually go bankrupt because you didn't ask 20 people.
Because you asked nobody. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to do the one part you mentioned, the restating the client's challenge and recapping that part. I think that's equally as important as your solution, if not more important, to just, again, it displays that you actually were listening in regards to your conversations with them. And I think like so many service providers that I see don't actually listen to what the client wants, and they give them what they think the client wants, if that makes sense. So it's not like, yeah, just taking time to actually acknowledge like, wow, this is the challenges that you're having and here's how we're going to provide that solution. Just like blows my mind. But it's a common thing.
Absolutely. I can share some real life examples, because I'm doing a lot of sales, and sometimes our traditional salespeople that, sell managed services, basic IT services, they get frustrated because they have problems with their sales. And so I had an example where another unit that was focused heavily on smart city solutions, they were frustrated because none of the clients were buying their proposals. And then one time we were called into the meeting and listened to this and support them because they needed somebody to translate. Yeah. And then they sent me the proposal and I was like, guys, the first 5 pages are, who are we? If you're an executive, you don't want to read the self-praise. Nobody cares. Yeah. Nobody cares. Yeah. We just changed in that one proposal. We put, so this is what we understood your challenges are. So from that, we have, boiled down that these are the primary issues. We did some translation. Yeah. So your objectives are A, B, C, D. All the rest, the complete solution stuff was the same. Even the price was the same. Suddenly they sold. And I was like, yes, because the person opens it, gets to the executive summary and reads about him. You literally just explained, you understood him, and I will solve your issues, don't worry. And that's it. It just makes such a huge difference.
I love that. I love that. In regards to, how do I say this? In regards to consulting in general, how can a consultant position themselves in a way that is different from other people in the market? Like where would you say you notice that some consultants fall short on, say, their positioning or the way that they portray themselves?
Yeah. And it comes down to the first principle of marketing itself is like, don't be me too. It already starts with this me too. Don't try to just copy and paste what other consultants are doing. And I'm not saying don't go, for example, for McKinsey and look how they build their pages or stuff like that. They are really good at that. So you can copycat certain structures. But people don't care about standardized ways of service description, stuff like this. They will always ask you, why the heck should I choose you over somebody else? And if you can't deliver this in 2 sentences, well, that's it. And I really think about, try to differentiate you in terms of from the position of the client, like trying to understand what is it, if you were in their shoes, you would need to get from this person. And never forget, a consultant is a really hands-on coach, which means like you have a standardized way of doing certain things and you bring in experience this person doesn't have to shortcut him to an objective. So everything you put on a page, everything you present, everything you talk about needs to really state this. I'm here to make sure you are more competent later and saved a lot of time. And then he will be your best friend. A lot of people try to sell consulting like product business with features and functions. Or we are the quickest in terms of whatever, or we are the nicest, or we have the best SAP tools. Or, who cares?
It's such a personalized service.
Yes. Yeah.
That's cool.
And I think a good example, a good example is also when you start earning more money. Usually and you wear suits. I wear a lot of suits. You usually start to go from off the rack to a more specialized tailor. Then you go to a real handmade tailor. And just the experience you get there, it doesn't mean like the suit will be so much more higher quality in terms of cloth, but it will perfectly suit you because the person just makes sure he cares about the details. And just try to imagine that.
I love that. Love that. If you don't mind me asking, what is some of the most, I think a big attraction for consultants is you can work on very unique projects. You can work on very unique problems. You get to work on a variance of things that, like, how do I say this? It's not just delivering the same old thing week after week. Yeah, sure. Like there's a line of like understanding throughout your niche, but like what's been some of the most interesting projects you've worked on if you're open and allowed to share?
Yeah, to be frank, there's a lot of interesting projects because being a strategy consultant, you always, and especially from coming from an IT company, you always have this mixture of understanding the business problem, understanding the business processes, then trying to tailor up a solution and then helping to deliver that solution that changes completely what their day-to-day job is. And as we serve a lot of public sector clients, that also means a lot of change management because people are always afraid there's another shitty tool that doesn't do the trick. They have more work or will get fired. But I would say there are some really cool projects we did. We did a really cool project with a French-based energy company. Literally one of the real integrated verticals. So they have from exploration, so finding oil over refining oil and pumping out the oil, refining oil, and then selling the gas themselves. It's a really cool stuff. And we worked with them in their marketing and sales department to modernize, let's call that a gas station. So we came up with a gas station of the future, which was all about, well, today you pump in gas in your car, which means like you're spending 5 minutes there and you go into the shop, they will try to upsell you something. Tomorrow you might spend 45 minutes because you're charging your electric car, which means like, what the fuck are you going to do with your time? Also, and what people don't get is like gas itself doesn't earn you a lot of profit. What earns you profit is the Snickers bar you buy in addition to that, because, well, the procurement price is 50 cents and selling is like €2.50, which means like a lot of margin. Optimizing this. And then we did a lot of prototypes for them. For example, what we did is we used their CCTV to recognize your license plate and inform somebody if there's a platinum loyalty card member coming into the gas station, so he could go out and refill your car and stuff like this. That was really impressive because we could really tie how do we change day-to-day operations and enhancing it with technology, AI, and that stuff. And then, frankly, a lot of the good projects is business process transformation. So just if you look at how people, especially in public sector, still work, it's like you stopped at the 70s or something like this, and you worry, you worry about not having enough people. Yeah, because you need 5 clerks to do the job of 1 because there's so much bureaucracy and so much, sorry for the word, effed up tools. Just transforming this, it's really awesome. It's really awesome because you can see how from the change management we do, from the fear of losing their job because there's automation stuff like this coming, to people being delighted that somebody literally takes off the crappy shit they need to do every day. It's amazing. It's really cool. So
I love that.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think as you're kind of talking about that, it was getting me thinking about like the consulting space is just like a really highly creative space for creative people to thrive. Like it allows us to come up with unique, wild ideas. And then from there, process of those ideas of how are we going to implement this? How are we going to take this to market? That's fascinating. I think an interesting thing with consulting that a lot of folks don't take into consideration, you mentioned it earlier, is that as a consultant, you do need to have a coaching element to your work. Like once you deliver, say you deliver a strategy, say you deliver the way that things are going to roll out, usually there's a lot of challenges that are going to get in the way of the client implementing. So you as the consultant then need to coach the client through the next steps of, like, the roadblocks, the mindsets that they start to come up while they're implementing. So anything you want to say in regards to that? Because I think I think that's a really overlooked area of consulting. Like I believe a coach is just the coach, and a coach shouldn't be technically delivering strategy, but a consultant is delivering strategy and then coaching the client through implementation as well. So yeah, anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, and I think you just framed it perfectly. So, coming back also to the point about how to differentiate against other consulting companies, especially larger ones, is like you have to get your mind around 20 years ago or 10 years ago. It was fine to have a consultant do a concept and then go off, and then you get something implemented over the next 3 years. But if you just realize how much faster the world has become, companies don't have time like this anymore. So you want somebody that can transition from just like being your what's the good word in English? I'm trying to find the word. It's like a psychiatrist. So you want to dig down into your problems. You want somebody to be able to diagnose this and find out what's your real problem. Then he needs to transition into, all right, I will paint up you a nice little concept or strategy that will solve that problem. But then you want them to transition into, and now I'm in the boat with you, helping you to row. And the storyline we use for my area is of the digital Sherpa, what we say, which means like if you compare a Sherpa or this high mountain hiking support person compared to a traditional journey seller, you don't just paint up the journey. You make sure that the person ends up at the highest peak of the mountain by sometimes carrying baggages, sometimes just guiding the way, sometimes just falling behind and let them do what they want to do, depending on how fit they are with the current, what's the word, part of the journey. And I think this is what makes more small business consultants much more attractive than these large ones, because you can tune to what your client needs depending on where they are on the journey.
Love that. I think that, to dive into that a bit more, like a small independent firm can actually spend so much more time just guiding and working with the client than in regards to a big firm. Like I think the value that small independents give is enormous in regards to like big firms. So big firms, like, here's your report, hopefully it works, blessings, peace out. Whereas the independent consultant can actually make that a big part of their service. It's like, we're going to give you the report, we're going to show you like the studies based on what we've seen, here's our strategy, then we're going to guide you through implementation. That's really cool. I like that. Anything else that you'd like to add in general? Like what can an independent consultant do to thrive? What are some mindsets that they maybe need to keep with them on the rest of their journey? And let's tie it off from there.
Yeah, I think, again, trying to reiterate what we discussed before, don't try to compete with large installed base companies. Don't try this. You will not win, because they will always have the better relationships to certain, for example, regulation officers. They will always have more people they can put into a project. They will always have the argument of, well, we are here for 40 years, You need to find the sweet spot, which they will never go to. And usually that means, if you niche down a lot, it means higher margin, and you don't need to feed other people. And do you know the series Suits?
Yeah.
There is one, I'm trying to find out which episode it was. There is one episode where the lady is trying to win a client and she's competing against her old firm. And you see the client switching between her and the big firm about the arguments they have back and forth. It goes like, I'm the smaller consultant. You will be my only client. I will do everything for you. So I will be perfectly tailor-made for you. And then he goes to the big firm and they say, yeah, she's great because we teach her everything, which is already a big win for them. And then secondly, they will say, yeah, and you will have a lot of challenges, regulations, and we have the good relationships with those regulators. So we eat with them every day. So the problem, in my opinion, in that situation is she tried to fight them on their own ground. You can't do that. And I think that episode, and I will try to find it out and send it to you, so you can send it to your community maybe later. It's really awesome. You learn so much about selling, positioning, and how not to compete against a large firm. It's really cool.
I love that. Dude, this is awesome. I really enjoyed chatting with you in general. I think you're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited to get this out and get this in front of people. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Troy. It was awesome talking to you. Looking for more interactions in the future. And if someone from your community has some questions, feel free to shoot them at me.
Cool. Fantastic, man. Awesome. Have a great day.
And you. Bye.